Welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast, journeys of descending into the mysteries and rising from the roots. I am your host, Lisa Hillier, spiritual mentor, and I am so grateful that you are here as I explore what it means to be human and dive into all kinds of different conversations that are so relevant at this time on this planet. And today I have McKay with me on the show, and I love this episode. I recently started beekeeping. I'm very, very, very new to the hives and what it means to be a beekeeper. I'm learning so much about the bees, and it's really, really exciting. And I'm super curious about how the bees work with PTSD and CPTSD. So I'm excited for this adventure that I am embarking on with the bees, and McKay is a beekeeper. And so a little bit about McKay. She has a background in entomology combined with over 10 years of beekeeping. And she is currently becoming a master beekeeper at Cornell University. She holds online courses, honey tastings, all kinds of magic all around the bees, and she cares for them, and she loves to share the magic with all of you. And yeah, she believes that one by one, we can help the bees and save the planet. And there's so much wisdom all around beekeeping in this episode. I loved it so much. Please share how you receive it. Share to anybody that you feel might be inspired to help the bees. And I know for myself, when I think of helping the bees, I always think of the honeybees, but there are thousands and thousands of species of bee species, and there are really easy ways that you can help them. So I'm going to post a link. We talk about bee hotels, and I also talk about a book, We Are the Ark, in the podcast. I'm going to post the links for those in the show notes. So yeah, do what you can. If you can get a bee hotel, amazing. Love it. If you can turn your yard into an ark for all the bees, for all the insects, amazing. If you're not already following me on my Instagram, I am in the process of purchasing a property and will be turning that, giving that back to nature, creating an ark with it. So I'll be sharing a lot of that process at Rewilding Roses on Instagram. I'm so grateful you're here. If you feel called, please share, like, follow the podcast, send to all your friends, anybody that might really be inspired by this episode. And if you feel called to support the podcast financially, the Patreon portal is so amazing for you to join as well. There are affiliate links in the show notes, and I am so, so grateful to everybody that has been purchasing through my affiliate link for the Wild Holistics. Their products are amazing. I use them all the time, fully support them, and you get a discount when you use discount code Lisa, and you receive 10% off, and a portion of that goes to the podcast, which is so amazing, and I am so, so grateful for that. So let's dive in and learn all about the bees. All right, welcome, McKay. You are my first beekeeper on the show.
First beekeeper, that's great.
Beekeeper, so I'm super excited. I recently started beekeeping, so I'm really new, really new.
Like, how new? Is this your first year, or how
Yeah,
new?
yeah.
Really? Oh, that's
like
exciting.
a couple weeks.
Okay.
So
How's it going?
Yeah. Well, good so far. Good so far. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I'm working with a mentor, so that is really, really
That's exciting. That's really
helpful.
great. Yeah.
And probably really, really necessary.
Well, I don't know where you're at, but our spring has been just so wonderful. Like, we had a really big snowpack this winter, struggle for the bees to get through, but now the spring is just like booming, nectar flow, like everything's going really well, and my hives are they're just doing really well so far. So it's good. It's good.
Here on the coast, I'm in Canada, Sunshine Coast, the blackberry bushes are already flowering. Yeah. So we've got honey flowing
nice
soon, when normally it happens in August. So That's
Oh,
really
yeah,
exciting.
that's amazing. That's so fun.
Earlier, earlier.
Hmm.
So, well, let's start with what's been your journey to beekeeping? How did you
My journey to beekeeping. A
end
lot
up
of
being a
people ask me that
beekeeper?
question, and so I studied entomology at university. And I will tell people like, oh, when I was a junior in high school, I took a zoology botany class that got me really fascinated in insects. And then my mom will interrupt me and say, no, 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 McKay, like your whole life you've loved bugs. Like as a little girl, you loved bugs. So I guess it just was a part of who I was. And honestly, I dove into it in college because I didn't know what else to do. And it was kind of filler classes that I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then I was like, well, I'm in it now. Let's do this. And my primary study was the beetle. I was doing a lot with ladybird beetles, and I thought beetles were fascinating. But at Utah State, they have the 10th largest bee collection in the world. And so I'm up there, and you just fall into bees and you can't help but just love them. And so I started beekeeping. Then I started assisting with hives. And then slowly, shortly after that, I got my own hive and started solo beekeeping. And I've been doing it for over a decade now. And back to school, I'm getting my master beekeeper. And so, yeah, it's been something I kind of stumbled into, but I've been so excited to like make this my job. Like I didn't think it was something that I could make a job, but all of a sudden that's what I'm doing and it's been the funnest thing in the world. So yeah.
So it's your job.
That's what I do. Yeah.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
what does the job aspect of a beekeeper look like? Like how do you make
Well,
money?
yeah. So I've had to be tricky. So you can be a commercial beekeeper, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't really love the monocrops, transporting all the bees, pushing your hive production of honey, and giving a poor sugar substitute. Like the health of the bees and the bees on the decline. Like there's so much of it that I'm so passionate about. And so I've kind of had to create my own path. I do a lot of bee education, kids classes, online adult beginner beekeeper classes, but then also I do honey tastings and I have these parties where we get together. I collect honey from all over the world and all different altitudes. We get together and we have this beautiful spread of charcuterie and you learn about bees and you learn about honey as you eat all the beautiful honey. And so it's a mixture of different things. And then I've just been lucky enough to uh, have social media. Like, how cool is it that we live in this day and age where you can connect with people from all over the world who love bees and like to have this little community. And so, yeah, there's a couple different avenues. So it's like you apply. It's like I kind of had to create this little job for myself, but it's working so far.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Do you go rescue bees? Like go and get
Yeah, for sure. I'll rescue. I'll do hive swarm rescues or whatnot. There's not a ton in our area, um, but like primarily, so I work with a lot of businesses too. I'm in the city here in Salt Lake, and there's two. Well, I have a coffee shop, two restaurants, a design firm. And I'll beekeep on their rooftops, and I'll educate their employees. And the employees can hop on the ladder and come up to the roof with me, and the restaurants are two really beautiful restaurants that I work with that do a lot of their own, like they have a high end chef and doing like articulate, beautiful little, like, chef stuff. And so I can give them the jars of honey. They take all the honey and they're doing wonderful things with their honey. So that's another little aspect of it too. So yeah, I'm everywhere. I'm doing all
Oh,
kinds of
that's
little
so
things
cool.
yeah.
That's so cool. Can
Yeah.
you speak to the commercial aspect and bees getting transported around? I
Yeah. So
never really thought about any of that of, the honey that you buy in the store and what actually happens for that to get to you.
well, bees being transported around is almost a different story than honey that you're buying in the store. But the what has happened is that we have created this demand for, you know, almond milk or avocados or whatever it is that a commercial farmer will have these monocrops, these just acres and acres of one crop. And that's not natural, it's not natural to have just acres and acres of that. So you got to bring in unnatural pollinators. You don't have anything native there that's going to fulfill that demand of pollinating everything. So you bring in hives and hives. set them there, and the blossoms will last 2-3 weeks. And then you rotate them and you get them to another place that's blossoming. And it's like this crazy honeybee migration that happens all over the United States of these bees being transported. And it's stress on the bees. You hear bee crashes and whatever, that the trucks tip over, things like that happen, pretty rare. But then also a lot of diseases. So if you have hives that close, if you're transporting them together really close, that's not like a natural way that honeybees would survive in the wild as well. And it can really mess with diseases, especially because 100% of those crops are dealing with some kind of sprays and pesticides to be able to help uh, produce fuller, more richer crops. And it's directly affecting the honeybees. And then so everywhere they're going, they're getting this, sprays, they're getting, and so it's extremely unhealthy. It's extremely unhealthy for the bees. So yeah, it's sad. It's pretty tragic. And there's not a lot of, I mean, you can't just stop it, like it would be like putting these big crop productions like under. So essentially what I do, like when people are like, save the bees, like what can we do to save the bees? The ultimate answer is to farm small and do stuff small, to support people who are rotating their crops, to have a small little farm or doing it, because that's where you're going to find the healthiest balance of your insect ecosystem, which is what you want. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess so this is happening because there's this huge demand for almonds all year round,
Right.
avocados all year round. So we're not living with the seasons. Is that fair to say?
Well, it is the season. So I mean, they transport them strictly on a schedule as to when things are blossoming and blooming and whatnot. But it's just a demand. I mean, like you can make, as a commercial beekeeper, substantially more money if you have 20 acres of almond trees rather than if you had 1 acre of almond trees. And if you scale that to 200 acres, you're bringing in lots of money, but that means you need a lot of pollinators to pollinate those trees. And working with native pollinators is nearly impossible because a lot of them are like solitary bees that you can't like trap and capture and tell them, go pollinate here. That's why honeybees are so awesome, is because you have pollinators in a hive that you can take and plop down in one area. If the queen is set there, they'll stay there and they'll stay put and they'll pollinate where they're supposed to. So I mean, it's pretty phenomenal. It's pretty cool that you can do that with these insects. But yeah, it is. It's not great. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Do you just work with honeybees or do you work with other bees as well?
No, I work with a lot of bees. I mean, I work with a lot of insects still. I still work with beetles and whatnot. Like six legs is my jam. The Mormon cricket is taking over in Nevada. There's like always a boom of the Mormon cricket, and I'm headed out tomorrow morning to go see if I can see some crickets. So like I'm always doing bug stuff, but bees are, yeah, I guess my main priority. And like I encourage people, like if they're thinking about being a beekeeper, one of my first things is to like really decide if that's what your yard needs. Like maybe you want to be a beekeeper, great, but it's going to mess up your little balance of your what you have going in your yard. Let's say you have your native bees that are doing such a good job at pollinating and everything's got a really good flow. You bring in this hive, and native bees or honeybees are not native to the US. And so we bring them in, plop them in our yard. That's introducing, 80,000 bees to an area. They start foraging, pollinating, whatever. It pushes those native bees out. They don't have, there's not enough food for everybody. And then in a year or two, you think, that's hard work. I don't want to be a beekeeper. That was too much. You take the hive away. It's going to take about 3 years for those native bees to come back. And you've just thrown off your whole ecosystem when, like, in the beginning, it probably was a good thing. And there's ways that you can cultivate those native bees and give the native bees a little house for them. And sometimes it's detrimental to be a beekeeper for sure.
So with those native bees, which ones are native to where you're at? I'm thinking Canada would be quite similar, but there's thousands of species, right, that are native.
Yeah, so there's 20,000 species of bees in the world. And man, like I work with a co-op garden, and it was a couple of weeks ago I went over and I thought, okay, I'm not leaving this spot until I see 10 different species of bees. And I was there for 20 minutes and then I could leave because if you know what you're looking for, there's like little fairy bees, there's nesting bees, there's bumblebees, there's squash bees, there's longhorn bees, like, and the little mason bees, they're so darling. They're so gentle. Like some of them, of the little solitary bees, don't even have stingers. And if you compare them 1 to 1 to a honeybee, they pollinate 50 times better than a honeybee. And so to cultivate an area where you have these little nesting solitary bees, sometimes you get better crops than if you were to have honeybees. So
Mm,
yeah,
mm-hmm.
it's just being aware, just knowing. People just don't know, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw in the store here a little house.
Yeah.
And then it had like a bunch of reeds in it. And
Yeah.
it was for the mason bees, because I believe the mason bees are
Yep. Mason bees, leaf cutter
a
bees,
lot
they'll go in
here.
there. Yeah. And that's such an easy way to invite those native bees into your yard. They're called bee hotels, to just set up a bee
Bee
hotel.
hotels. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so cute. Can you
Yeah.
explain for everybody listening what a bee hotel is and what happens in a bee hotel?
Yeah. I almost I I just took one out of here, but I was making some of them. So I have a bunch of these reeds here. So it's just a bunch of these little tiny reeds. It's just a straw basically. And what will happen is these little solitary bees, they just live alone. So they'll come in this tube and they take a little section here and they'll lay one egg. They'll produce a little bit of honey for the larva when it hatches for it to survive. And then they will fill this tube up. And so this tube will be about 5 bees or so. And they leave. It's not like it's their, I mean, it'll be their home as they're building their nest. They'll stay in there to stay away from rain or whatnot. But then after it's full, they abandon it and those little bees will hatch and they go on and doing the same journey. So they only live by themselves, whereas honeybees depend on each other to survive. These bees can live by themselves. And so you provide a little space for that, for these bees to be away from other kind of predators or have a safe, they feel comfortable in your garden. They're going to come make a home. They're going to pollinate all your plants and they're a joy to watch. Like I have some at my nephew's house. I have 2 adorable little nephews and we have them at their eye level. So these nephews can get right up in there and just watch the bees. And they're so gentle and they are so busy and focused on working. They're very hardworking bees. They do not care about my nephews. I mean, my nephews can just sit there and watch them build these nests. And it's a really fun little
Oh,
education thing.
cool.
So yeah.
And what are those little reeds? What are they made out of? Is it just
These are
cardboard?
bamboo shoots. I
Bamboo
mean,
shoots. Okay.
yeah, these are bamboo shoots. There's different types. Like I like to make my own, and this way, if it gets moldy or something happens, I can pull them out and I can replace them with some clean ones for the next year or whatnot. There's some that are like cardboard, and I'm thinking, I don't know how well those would do in like moisture and the rain or whatnot. I kind of
Right.
like the bamboo shoots, but basically, it's just a small little hole. You can even take a block of wood and use a drill and just drill a bunch of holes and that will kind of do the same thing. But again, I like the reeds because I like to be able to take them out and replace them and clean them and make sure that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Where do
they're
you get
clean.
those bamboo shoots?
Amazon. I hate referring people to
I
Amazon,
know.
but Amazon, it's the best.
You know what? I
Best
saw
price.
best price.
Yeah.
A big bamboo shoot that a guy was putting in a plant pot and then drilling like holes all through the sides.
Oh,
And
cool.
he would put the compost in the big bamboo shoot
Okay.
in a plant pot. And I was like, where the heck do you get big bamboo shoots like that? Probably Amazon.
Probably Amazon.
Yeah,
Shoot.
but it
Yeah.
was a really, really cool idea. Okay, so save the bees. What are some ways that we can contribute to the population of the non-honeybees? We'll start there. Ways that we can help
The
the
native
bees that,
bees.
yeah, that aren't the
Yeah.
honeybees.
Bee hotels are great, providing a little space for them. But to stop spraying your yard, like the biggest thing that is affecting not only bees but all insects is the pesticides. And there's relatively new, 5-10 years, is a pesticide called neonicotinoids, and they're in a lot of sprays that you have, and they will live in the plant for years. They can live if it's a wooded, like a tree, like a fruit tree that you're spraying, that wood will hold on to this neonicotinoid for 5-10 years. And so that means if you're spraying in the summer. And people say, I don't spray when my trees are blossoming. You know, you don't want to spray the blossoms because the bees are on it. But then the blossoms die, you spray the trees, and then the next spring they blossom, and that nicotinoid has been living inside the tree, that to the point where it's become so potent because you're spraying it every year. So it gets so potent that these honeybees or any type of pollinators, even like your wasps and whatnot, will drink that nectar. And some bees are so disoriented, it becomes poisoned, they can't even make it back to the hive. And some bees will even just straight up die on the flowers. So huge problem with spraying. Try and be creative. Try and think of ways that you can get rid of the pesty insects in your yard in a better way. A lot of times it just requires a little bit of patience, you know, that nature will kind of correct itself, and it's fun to kind of watch that. If you have a plant infested with aphids, if you give it a second, the ladybugs come and they'll start cleaning it up. And a lot of times too, what will help with that in the yard is having a bunch of diverse plants. And so you have insects that are drawn to one plant and insects that are drawn to another, and they can kind of help each other out in their defenses and creating something a little bit more healthy in your yard. So I would say not spraying, and then planting a diverse abundance of things. Most nurseries have a native plant section. So that's the best stuff for your yard is your native plants. They're going to thrive better in your area, and they're going to be the best things for your insects. So plant your flowers and quit spraying, I guess, are the two big things.
Yeah. So. And you can plant companion plants, right?
Yeah,
where it's like,
absolutely.
I did tomatoes and basil together.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It makes the tomatoes taste a little basil-y, which is like so
that's
magical.
Great.
But I'm sure it does something too with
and then you have like the marigolds that you can plant next to your tomatoes too, that will help with the hornworms like that. I think it's the scent that will kind of deter them. So yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you don't even know what you're doing planting plants next to each other, and it just is kind of a happy accident. Then it's like, oh, that worked out nicely. But, yeah. But yeah, again, it's not natural to like plant a ton of one thing in a certain area, you know, mix it up. Yeah.
Is there anything that comes to mind for you with Brussels sprouts? What to plant with Brussels sprouts? Because I've got something serious happening in my Brussels sprouts.
What's happening to your Brussels sprouts?
There's little holes in all the leaves, so I think they must be getting eaten by something.
Yeah, it might be beetles. I don't know. You'll have to send me a picture. But yeah, depending on what it is. Man, my Brussels sprouts, I just had to keep away from my chickens. My chickens were my biggest threat to my Brussels. Do you have chickens?
I'm getting chickens.
They're the best. They're the best and the worst. They are the worst, but that's really fun. But yeah, I don't know. There's all kinds of different like tips and tricks. If you have a lot of earwigs, it might be an earwig problem. That you can take a can of tuna and you get out most of the tuna, but you leave in the nasty juice. Maybe you can even put a little like cod liver oil or something in there to make it kind of stinky. And you bury it just so it's flush with the ground. So these earwigs can crawl in, and they'll be attracted to that scent, and they'll crawl in and they can't get out because they're in the oil and whatnot, and they'll die inside the can. So that's an easy way to get rid of earwigs, is just kind of bury some little tuna things overnight, you know, for a week or so, and get rid of your earwigs. So there's all kinds of little tricks, and some of them work better than others. But it really is just patience and like, you know, taking off your shoes, getting your toes in the dirt, and like learning about your yard, you know, is the best thing. Because there's a lot of things that go into gardening, you know, the quality of the soil and just all the watering and things. But then the insects, have a huge impact on things. So
worms, do they play a big part in getting rid of insects in your garden?
Not that I'm aware of. So I deal mostly with six legs, so I don't really know much about the no leg family. Okay. But I don't think they're too horrible. I don't know, actually.
Well, I was
mostly for decomposing.
Yeah, I have a worm farm.
Oh, nice. Red wigglers? What are you doing?
Well, yeah, they're the vermicast, I think it is.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, the other one. So I was just curious if they would get rid of insects in the garden. I mean, mine are in a separate area to get the black gold.
I see.
The magical soil.
Nice. Yeah, you're doing some good things over there. How much land do you have? Like, how big are your gardens?
Well, I'm moving onto hopefully a couple acres. So my beehive is over at my mentor's place, and then my worms are just on my deck in my townhouse until I'm right on the ocean, but until I get my couple acres. Yeah. So
That's great.
Super exciting. Super
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah. Okay. So anything else come to mind on how you save the bees?
Uh, Shoot. There's
Are those
there
good?
there's so much. I mean, if you want to, go full in and not support big crops anymore and go a little bit nuts,
Mm,
there's all kinds of like laws that are trying to be in place like here in Utah and different areas to like help out the pollinators. So you can, I mean, if you want, you can get really involved. But I feel like if you just want to give some baby steps, you don't want to be overwhelmed. I think it's huge for all of us to stop spraying and plant more flowers. Just like
yeah.
really turn your head to just being aware of things. Like get yourself a book on bees and educate yourself on what's coming in and out of your garden. Like it's really fun.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
should get rid of the bird watchers and become bee watchers because I think
Oh,
it's
that
more
would be
fun.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
really fun. What's your like most favorite part of beekeeping and what's your least favorite part?
Oh man. I think it shifts all the time. I like that it's a never ending pit of learning. I like that, I'm constantly figuring new things out. And I like too that like the bees are the teacher. Like we're their keepers, but they're the ones that we really need to listen to and like understand, okay, what's going on with this hive, that I'm not pushing my agenda on them and I'm opening up the hive and thinking, okay, well there's 10 different ways I could fix the problem that I'm seeing right now. What do I feel like would be best for the bees, And I try one way with one hive and it works great. And another hive, I got to try something a little bit different. So I kind of like that Sherlock Holmes kind of approach to your hives. I think that's really fun. I like being with my bees and trying to understand them. It's very fulfilling for me. Worst part is I hate the heat. It's like it's the worst hobby to have if you hate the heat, and I hate the heat. And so to get all suited up and just sweat like crazy, it's the worst. So I try and do my beekeeping, in the morning before it gets too hot. But so I think that, but I mean, really, that's the only thing I have to complain about. Really, is the
That's not
heat.
bad.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
bad. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, I wear gloves. I fully suit up, but I've seen a lot of videos of beekeepers, and I'm super new, where they don't suit up and they're just like so calm
Yeah,
with the bees that they
yeah.
don't get stung, and there's no fear around that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are times where I won't wear my suit. It depends on what I'm doing. If it's a full hive check and I'm going to be in my hive for a good while looking at each of the frames, I don't want to risk them getting too aggressive. I usually don't wear gloves, but you can kind of tell when they start getting aggressive. You can kind of see the guard bees and when you need to use more smoke and when you don't. So there's definitely ways that you can be more zen, more one with your bees. But it also is like, I know my bees, like I know kind of the temperament of them. I know that, and like, there's different things. If I open the hive up when it's raining, they're going to be so mad. Like, I don't want to, aggravate them. Like, I know kind of how to deal with them. I see the viral videos of people catching swarms where they have very little equipment on. And I always think that's a little bit nuts because you don't know the temperament of those bees. Like generally when a hive swarms, it's very vulnerable. It's going to be pretty docile. But I can guarantee you the people who are catching swarms with no equipment have gone in already, tested out the temperament of the bees, and then backed out, dressed down, and hit record on their videos, like guaranteed.
Right. Right.
So, and you want to be careful with that too. You don't want to be advertising like, yeah, you don't need equipment because yeah, it can turn pretty quick, and you want to be prepared. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So can you kind of explain like smoke, what that does, how you work with the smoke as a
Yeah.
beekeeper?
Smoke. So smoke does three things. The bees work a ton with pheromones. They can let the entire hive know in 3 seconds if there's an intruder in the hive, which is really cool, all through scent. And so that smoke will muffle that. It's usually from the guard bees that you want to muffle. They're the ones that are going to be sending out that scent. And so it's to muffle the scent. It's also if they smell that smoke, they feel like there's a forest fire and their reaction is to stay grounded, protect the queen. So you're going to have a little bit less of the bees flying around because they're kind of in this my hive's on fire mode. And then the third thing is that a lot of them will start gorging themselves on honey. And what it does is it elongates their abdomen. So it makes it harder for them to like curve over and sting you if they're gorging themselves on honey, because they think they need to relocate, that their hive's on fire. And so they're less likely, or they're less able to sting you because they're full of honey. So those are kind of the three things, but mostly it's to mess up those scents that are,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. And can you use anything in your smoker? What's kind of the
Yeah,
go-to?
anything organic material. I use cardboard, and when I get my cardboard, I make sure there's no like ink on it, like no printing or no like packing tape on it or whatever. And then I like to grab a handful of any like dead leaves or twigs that are just around my hive, to kind of, I don't know. I don't know why. I'd like maybe give them a little smell of something that's close to them. I have no idea why I do that, but I like to grab a handful of just like odds and ends right by my hive. But yeah, anything organic, I say you can throw in there. A lot of people like burlap, or yeah, burlap. Is that the brown stuff? Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? Yeah,
Burlap
I
sacks.
don't know why
Yeah.
that sounded weird, but yes, burlap. But I like cardboard. It's just something
Nice.
I always have on hand. So yeah.
So with the hives,
Hmm.
there's the queen bee, there's the honeybees, there's the drones. Can you kind of like, what are all the bees
Yeah.
in the colony? And how
Oh man,
many?
I feel
Yeah.
like I could talk about stuff like this forever, because I just, it really is just such a bottomless pit of fun knowledge. So you have boys, girls, and queens, or not queens, the queen. If you have multiple queens, they fight. You can only have one queen. So the girls in the hive, they're the workers, and they live 20 days inside the hive, 20 days outside of the hive. And the girls are the ones, like, as soon as they're born, they clean out their cells and they turn into nurser bees, where they start tending to the baby larvae and the eggs, and they help clean out the cells to get ready for the queen to lay an egg again. And then they graduate and they're building comb and they're feeding the queen, and then they're cleaning out the hive. They're tidy little creatures, and you can watch the worker bees drag out dead bees and just like kick them off the side of the hive. And then after 20 days of being inside the hive and kind of graduating through a series of these jobs, they advance to forager. And then the last 20 days of their life, they're out foraging. And their entire life, as they grow up, their bee venom gets stronger. So forager bees have a stronger bee venom, which makes sense because they're out foraging and they're the ones that are going to be protecting the hive and whatnot. And then after those 20 days, they're gone. So the worker bees only live for 40 days, and they usually leave the hive to die. And so I kind of always, I smile. I don't say anything, but I smile when people are saying, I saw a bee and it was dying and I helped it. And I'm thinking, well, you probably helped it for a couple hours. It's done, like it's done. It's so sweet that people love to help, but there's a huge turnover rate in the hive. The queen bee, she's a female too, and she lays her body weight in eggs every day. So she's laying thousands and thousands of eggs, and that turnover rate of the hive is huge. And then you have your boys. The queen can choose if she wants to lay a female egg or a male egg, which is really cool. And if there is enough food, if things are going really well, she'll start laying the boys, and the boys are the drones. And the drone's job is to mate with queens from other hives. And that's the only job they have. So when they're at home, they just gorge themselves on food. And that's why the queen has to be careful if she's laying boys, because if there's not enough food, and there really needs to be like comb production or, whatever happening, she's not going to want boys around. And you'll see, even if the nectar flow drops, hibernation's around the corner, the worker bees will start escorting the drones out of the hive, and they'll just kick them out of the hive because all they do is eat. So, but they'll go off, they'll mate with queens from other hives in midair. And in the mating process, their genitalia explodes and they die, is how they put it. And so that's it. If they are successful in their mission, they die. They don't return to the hive. And if they can't find a queen, they come back to the hive and they'll just keep eating food and go out flying the next day and see if they can find a queen. So it's a wild ride. It's a little adventure in there, and mostly it's just the worker bees who are running the show, which is kind of cool.
How long does the queen live?
She can live 3 to 5 years, and she's laying her body weight in eggs like every day as she's doing that, which is pretty phenomenal. It's really crazy.
Does she leave the hive?
She will leave the hive once. So she hatches from her cocoon, and she will go on her mating flight, and she mates with drones from other hives, and then she returns to her hive, and she'll mate with 10 to 15 drones while she's out, and she will return to the hive, and then she's fertile for the rest of her life. She won't need to do that again.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's pretty
It's
cool.
so cool. Yeah.
And what are the like physical characteristics of the queen that make her different? Like you can tell when you're looking at a hive,
Yeah.
like there's the queen.
Yeah, it takes an eye. You got to train your eye a little bit. So it's fun to learn how to hunt for the queen, but her abdomen is a little bit longer than the worker bees, and she has a bald spot on the back of her head. And usually you can tell where she is, mostly because the worker bees are surrounding her. There's a little circle because she doesn't even feed herself. Even the worker bees will feed her. Her only job is to lay eggs, and so they are attending to her every need. So usually you can find the worker bees surrounding her, but yeah, she's got a little bit of a longer abdomen. And then the boys, they're bigger. Their whole body is a little bit bigger, and their eyes are huge, and they even touch at the top. So the worker bees have smaller eyes and they're on the side, but the drone bees, their eyes almost touch at the top. And that's because they're out flying, and they need to, like, their main job is to mate with these queens who are flying, and the mating happens like 50 to 100 feet in the air. So they have been born with these specialized eyes that they can see at crazy speeds and are able to accomplish that.
Oh, cool. So the queen can decide the sex of her babies.
Yeah, and I used to tell that fact, and I used to think, wow, that's magic. Like, bees are magic, and I would just kind of leave it there. And I didn't really know the science behind it. Well, back in school, learning more about bees, I found out it's not really magic. There's actually a science to it. Is that when she mates, she inside her has a sac that she carries the sperm in, and excuse me, the worker bees are so they're it's haploids and diploids. That the drones are non-fertilized eggs, and the workers are the diploids that are, is that right? Yeah, diploid and haploid. Yeah, the worker bees are fertilized eggs. So what she is doing basically is she's fertilizing an egg before she lays it, or she's not fertilizing the egg, and that will choose if it's a boy or a girl. So not that
Okay.
magic, but still really cool.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
With the queen, royal jelly. What is the royal jelly?
Yeah.
And yeah.
There's so many substances that come from the hive. You have your wax, your honey, your propolis, your pollen, and then the royal jelly. And the royal jelly is a substance that the worker bees secrete from their head. And this is meant to feed the baby larva and the queen. The queen eats it exclusively her entire life. The larva, the eggs hatch, and they will be swimming in a little pool at the bottom of the honey cell in royal jelly. And that's what they eat for the first 30-ish hours of their life. After that point, the worker bees switch them over to eating it's a bee, they call it bee bread. It's a bee pollen and honey mixture. And the lack of those enzymes help that little larva become a worker bee. If they do not, this is the craziest thing. If they don't switch the larva over to eating the honey and pollen, if they feed it just exclusively royal jelly, that worker bee's body changes into a queen bee. Like, it will just raise up a new queen. And so, yeah, so if the queen is getting old, if she's not laying, the worker bees decide, we're going to raise up a new queen, and they'll raise up a couple of new queens, which is crazy. Or if something happens to the queen, she dies. If they still have eggs or larvae that is still in that 30-hour window, no problem. They can get themselves a new queen. So
By feeding her the royal jelly.
just the royal jelly. And people say it's like the fountain of youth, royal jelly. Like, if the queen eats it and she's fertile her whole life, like, it must mean something. But I really feel like a lot of it is a marketing scam. I mean, you can find royal jelly in a lot of beauty products now. Have you noticed that?
No, I've never even heard of royal jelly outside of beehives.
Yeah, now that you'll start seeing it, and it's so confusing because it's like, I've had some royal jelly that I've had to, like, store at a certain temperature. Like, it's very, it's very temperamental. You got to keep it nice. Well, these beauty products, it's just on the shelf in your supermarket. It's on the shelf at Sephora or whatever. So it's not really being kept too well. And you read the ingredients, it's 15th, 20th thing down on your ingredient list. And
Right.
it's not doing you any good at that point. And
Yeah.
so it's a huge marketing scam if you're getting something just for the royal jelly. So just beware. And really, we shouldn't be stealing royal jelly from the hive. That's like the larva's food. I don't know what we're doing with that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So honey, do you eat the honey from the hives?
Yeah. Yeah. I eat
Yeah.
honey all the
Okay.
time.
Like,
Absolutely.
I love the honey. I love the honey. But I
Well,
think, is it important for beekeepers to like not get the honey right away, like to the
absolutely.
first year? Can you kind of speak to that of like when is it okay to take some
Absolutely.
honey from the
So,
bees?
yeah, a lot of beekeepers, like they think, well, I mean, that's how their journey to beekeeping starts is I love honey. I'll keep bees. And it's like, well, okay, you got to realize that in your first year of beekeeping, you shouldn't be taking any of that honey. The first year of beekeeping should be focused on the health of the hive and building out the hive and helping them get established. Here in Utah, we have some pretty harsh winters. So you like to make sure that your bees have the best food supply over the winter. So if you are harvesting your winter, new hive in the spring, they do really well through the summer. Come fall, you do a really good honey harvest, take all their honey, and then you put some sugar substitute in the hive to winterize them. That's just as good as us eating sugar every day. Like the honey is a magical substance that has a lot of like antibacterial, antimicrobial properties that you want the bees to benefit from. You want them to survive the winter. And so if there is by some crazy reason a huge abundance of honey, then maybe you can harvest a little bit. But I like to harvest my honey in the spring. So I leave them with the honey. I open up the hive in the spring. I make sure everyone's healthy. The nectar flow has started, blossoms are happening, and I'll take some of the excess honey that they didn't eat over the winter. But other than that, yeah, and that's another reason as to why I wouldn't want to be a commercial beekeeper, because if that's your livelihood to make honey, to push that honey, you're going to be doing everything you can to take that honey and leave them with something that's not as beneficial. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're in beekeeping because you want honey, you got to rethink some things. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
For you, what would be the main reason that you would get into beekeeping for the people listening? Like what are some reasons to get into it?
Um, I don't, man, I guess there could be a lot of reasons that I would smile about, but I think just to be able to understand nature a little bit more, to be able connect with your surroundings. I feel like the best beekeepers I know have like dedicated themselves and some time to really understanding about the hive and like being able to like, it's not this is happening, so this is what you should be doing, but like being able and willing to problem solve and help those little creatures survive. So yeah, I guess curiosity and dedication and wanting to connect with nature, I think is a great reason to get into beekeeping. Also, if you're looking at your garden, your property or whatever, and noticing that there is like a in imbalance in the ecosystem and wanting to help that out. But again, I really can't stress enough that like if there is healthy pollinators, if your yard is doing really well, sometimes it doesn't matter your curiosity or whatnot. Like you should focus on that. You shouldn't be a beekeeper. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's good
yeah,
info. That's good info.
yeah.
What about, let's go into PTSD and CPTSD
Sure,
and bees.
sure.
I'm very curious about that
I'm very
aspect.
curious about it too. Yeah, there's a lot of new medical advances in so many different fields that they're just discovering just these magic things about bees. And I, yeah, I'm super curious. And forever, I've told my friends, I'm like, oh, the cure to cancer has to be bees. It has to be bees. And I don't know, maybe I'll live to the day where I see that that's actually true. But there is something extremely calming and extremely how I don't even know another word other than magic than to be around the bees. They have a gentle hum.
Mm,
To be able to be around them. And I like to not wear gloves mostly because I like to be extremely intentional. I find that most of the stings I get, almost all the stings I get, are because it's my fault. I was reaching too fast. I was treating it like I was just going through, checking a box. And when you slow down and you're able to move slow, I'm not grabbing a bee. Like usually it's like I grab a bee and it stings me. But if I don't have my gloves on, I can move really slow and I can make sure that I'm like very present with the bees. And really, if you're not present, if you're moving really fast, you'll get stung. Like and so it really encourages you to just be there and be present. They say that there's something very calming about the bee hum and very, I guess, therapeutic towards it. When I first heard that, I just I had to chew on it for a second. I'm really skeptical of a lot of things. And so I was like, I don't know. But like the more I work with bees, the more I'm just like, yeah, I can feel that. Like I can really I can sink my teeth into that. And there's different things too, where like people feel like even the air from the hives is very beneficial. So there's places you can go in Australia where they'll rig up like a tube, and the tube comes up to your face and you got a mask over your face and you just breathe in. There's a filter so the bees can't get through it, but you just breathe in the hive air, and that's supposed to be really good for your system. Or there's hives that like the entrance is on the outside of the building, but the hive is internal. So they have like maybe an observation window or something, but on top of the hive is a platform where you can lay down. So you can lay down and you can feel the hum of the bees. So the bees are outside. They're not even close to you, or like they're really close to you, but they're not in the room with you. And you can pay money in these crazy Australian places to go and just lay on the bees, which is so crazy. I mean, it's crazy, but like I've bought into it. I love it. I think like really feel like it calms me. I feel like I am a better person because I work with bees. I feel like I understand how to be present. And I tried, have you heard of a bee beard? You ever heard of a bee
No.
beard? So
No.
the bees will stay with their queen. They're loyal to their queen. So if you take the queen out of the hive, you put her in a little box and you wear her as a necklace, all the bees start coming and landing on you. And I was wearing a tank top, had my hair in a top knot, and the bees just start landing on you and they just create it's a beard. So it's a bee beard. And it is like an extreme form of meditation because the bees can sense, they completely can sense your energy. And I used to kind of laugh at that too, but when I'm out at the hive, if there's something tense, if my mind's not focused, I feel the energy of the bees start getting a little bit more rambunctious. I feel their circles start spinning faster. And if I catch myself in that moment, I can take a deep breath, I can just calm, and the bees will drop right with me. They'll calm down. And it's one of the coolest things to experience. And so if you're doing a bee beard, you really have to be calm. And so it's a crazy mental game that like you have to be meditative or else there's consequences. Yeah.
Gonna
So
hurt.
yeah. And so, but it was amazing. It was a really fun thing to try to experience. I feel like bees are such a gentle creature. And yeah, there's something about connecting with them, which is why I feel like they know more than I do, that I'm there to assist them. I'm there to see what they want, and not be putting sugar and plastic and all these things in the hive, but try and like honor like the way they've been doing their beekeeping and the honeycomb shape and all the things that they're doing for centuries. Like, why am I there to disrupt that? I'm there, if anything, to just kind of correct the things that humans are impacting on them, any of the diseases and stuff that's essentially our fault. So yeah.
When you were speaking to that sleeping above the bees, there was a place on the coast where I live here that had that. I never ever went,
really?
but where you could sleep on the bees. But this coast that I live on lost 95% of the honeybees last winter.
Where are you at?
Sunshine Coast,
okay,
just north of Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of reasons. It rains a lot here in the winter. Some said mites.
Yeah.
There are other conspiracy theory ideas, but lots of different ideas as to why all of the, or 95% of the bees died. But his bees died, so he doesn't have these.
Oh, that's so sad.
Beds anymore. So that is unfortunate. But The frequency, I remember, I think it was on your Instagram, like it's Zach
Yeah.
Bush's voice, and he's speaking to the frequency that bees give off,
Hmm.
helping with PTSD and CPTSD. And I have CPTSD, and when I'm around bees, I get anxious, but I think it's because I've just associated that with like, somebody's going to sting me kind of thing.
Mm.
So I'm very curious to see how that evolves
Yeah,
over the next couple of
absolutely.
years of me working with
Well, and
bees.
I don't like suffer with any of that. A part of me wishes I could so I could play with it. And like I think it's kind of exciting that you have this like little challenge ahead of you as to like, is this gonna
Yeah.
help? Is this not gonna help? And
Yeah.
how cool to be able to throw yourself into something like that. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's neat to like recognize what comes up when you're around them, and just
Yeah.
monitoring how it shifts. And it's so true. Like you have to be so unbelievably present. And I think that's what I love about it. I was speaking to a farmer on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and it's like I spent years building an online business, and now all I want is like hands in the dirt, outside in nature, and learning
Yeah.
from like real things. And so that's what the bees offer
Yeah. It's
as
it's been a
well.
balance for me because I make bee content and I'm here to make videos, but when I'm out there, I don't want to be pulling out my phone. Like there's so many moments that are just like so it's been tricky to find a balance of being there and when to pull out my phone or when not to. But man,
Yeah.
I love that you're doing that. That's really cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It's like just boundaries
Yeah.
around the social media. So with sugar water, what should you feed them?
Well, I mean, I sorry, I'm just kidding. Sugar water's fine. I mean, like it's there's not a whole lot of, wonderful alternatives when you're talking about like how amazing honey is. And especially like right now where I have a really good nectar flow happening, my bees are bringing in a lot of really great honey, great pollen. And I don't know what's going to be happening next month or next or this winter, we might have another really crazy winter. And so for them to be able to store up all those beneficial things and be eating primarily sugar water where I know that they're healthy, it's not a bad thing. I wouldn't fight against that. I think that it's nice to be able to store up that a little bit of like real honey for hard
Real
times.
honey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I did
Yeah.
see, I knew another beekeeper, and she bought this bee tea, which was something that you could make the bees that had like similar properties to their honey.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I haven't,
I need
haven't
to
heard
message
about
her
that.
because I
There,
tried to
yeah,
find
there's all
it.
kinds of little things. Like there's some that will put like an apple cider vinegar in there to help with certain things. But I like to think, and from what I've read, there's a lot of things like propolis in the hive. It's kind of acts as their medicine in their hive, and it's amazing the things that propolis can do, and some really cool things that they're doing in the medical world with propolis. But I mean, and beeswax as well. They call that the skin of the hive. It just is kind of this almost alive, breathing, malleable substance that they house all the honey and the larva and the pollen, like everything houses inside this beautiful substance that I don't think they need too much of our help. I think, but like if you're opening your hive, if your friend is opening your hive and thinking, like they're they're dealing with mold more than this other hive is, or I really feel like I could help this, like I'm sure there's ways that we can assist and help with the things that are inside the hive. But I think primarily letting them thrive and the substances and the things that they're doing is like number one.
That's, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Letting them do their thing. Can you speak to swarming bees? I know, like, when I'm checking the hives, we want to look for swarmers
Yeah, the
around
swarm
the
cells.
edges. Yeah. Can you speak to that?
So really, this might be a pretty aggressive thing to say, but I almost believe it that if your hive is swarming, it's the beekeeper's fault. Like, so they essentially, it's just the hive, like that's what they do in nature. The hive gets too big and they decide that they need to swarm. So half of the hive will leave with a new queen. So they'll lay a new queen, and this queen will emerge, go on its mating flight, come back, and take half the hive away with it. And that's how it happens in nature, that you get multiple hives. It's not like you can get a queen bee and start a new hive. Like they all need each other. The queen bee can't survive without the workers, and vice versa. And so that's how hives split and reproduce in nature. If we're a beekeeper, like, we should be a little bit more in control of that, because if you have hives in a city like I do, you don't want your hive to swarm and end up in the coffee shop next door, and like it can be kind of disastrous. So you want to be in control of when that hive splits. And so it takes 16 days for a larva to hatch and grow into your queen bee. So you want to be in there in between 16 days to make sure that there's no like swarm cells that are happening. No, they're not growing a new queen. And if you see that they're growing a new queen, before you destroy it, you figure out why. Why are they growing a new queen? Did the queen die? Sometimes the queen's dead and they're growing a new queen, and it's just like they're doing exactly what they should. Sometimes they're ready to swarm. So in that case, there's a couple different things you can do. You can destroy the cell. So you're like, no, not today. You're not swarming today. And then just add more boxes on top so they have more room, because they're thinking, oh, we're busting at the seams. We got to make room for more things here. So sometimes they just need more boxes. Or you can facilitate your own split and be able to take half the hive, take the new queen cell, and you can make two hives and be able to put it where you want to put it, instead of it ending up in like the eave of somebody's garage or something. And so that's all it is like, it's just their natural way of doing things. It's like a really awesome thing. Sometimes it can be so that's one reason that they would swarm, is that they're busting at the seams. Another reason would be that they're not happy with their home. Maybe you've just installed your beehive and you have a wet, moldy hive, or it's being infested with beetles, with ants, and for whatever reason the queen is just like, we got to relocate, we got to find something different. So again, that's something that you need to be on top of as a beekeeper, thinking like, oh, I have hive beetles, or like, oh, this is probably an unfit place for my bees. And so you got to kind of stay on top of that to make sure they're not going to take off. And then sometimes, every once in a while, they just do whatever they're going to do, and I can't figure out why. So, but
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty rare. You usually could stay on top of swarms. So,
Okay. The worms try to leave too if they don't like their home.
oh really?
Actually, yeah, we didn't have rain for like a month and a half, and then we had 2 days of rain, and the worms tried to get out of their homes
Oh
because
wow.
it's raining, and the
Yeah,
worms come out. Yeah, so anyway, it's just interesting
yeah, that's
working
great.
with these types of things, because I'm like, yeah, my worms try to escape sometimes too,
Yeah.
which is a cue for me that there's something wrong with their
See, yeah,
home. Yeah, and so I need
yeah,
to help the
totally.
little guys out.
I like that.
Totally. Yeah. So longevity in bees. I was told that beekeepers live the longest. Is this
Well,
true?
I was told that too, and I believe it with all my heart. And then I made a reel on Instagram, and it got flagged for
Oh,
misinformation or something. And I was like, I swear it's true. I'm gonna live to 100 and prove them wrong, and then I'll call up Instagram and be like, I told you.
told you,
But
told you.
no, I believe it. I think there is something though about number one, just like having a healthy mindset, a present healthy mindset that is going to help you live longer. This is my hippie side coming out. There's nothing, medical to back this up. This is just McKay's doctrine. But then also, I think there's something quite magical about bee venom. I really do. And,
Mm,
beekeepers getting stung periodically, I think that's great. I think it's good for you. Every time I get stung, it makes my day. It's a little, it's kind of fun. So I don't know. I think there's something to it. I think there's something to in combination with all the things. And, they have these centers where you breathe air from the beehives and you lay on top of them and all that stuff, because they have seen in small ways benefits to that. And so if that's your job and you're out there doing that all the time, like, you're reaping benefits in one way or the other. I don't think you could live a long life, as a chain smoker and a beekeeper. Like, there's got to be some kind of balance. But I also think that beekeepers are more aware of nature, and they gravitate towards a healthier lifestyle as well. But
Yeah.
so it's a lot of
It's,
things, I think.
yeah. They're doing it for a reason. They're
Yeah.
not, yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Like, because that's part of their
Yeah.
lifestyle is maybe health and nature and
Yeah, I think so. That's
doing
my
good
guess.
things for the environment, maybe.
Yeah.
So the bee venom, so there's a lot of good
Oh yeah.
in the bee sting.
I know a beekeeper up in Alaska, extremely arthritic hands, and he says that every time he gets stung on his hands, he has a relief from the pain of his arthritis for a day or two, which is crazy. I interviewed a girl that had Lyme's disease, and there's a there's a special on Netflix you can watch about the bees and Lyme's disease, but it's not like we're not it's not like medically like proven, but there's a whole group of people who have Lyme's disease that have gotten together. They've kind of gone rogue, and they feel like the bee venom therapy is helping them. And this girl she would get 30 bees shipped to her house every week, and 3 times a week she would sting herself 10 times in that day. She had to work up to 10 stings. That's a lot of stings. And she would sting herself along her spine. So she'd line up these little tweezers with her bees, and she'd reach behind and sting herself on her spine. And she was experiencing huge results from this, that she was going longer without having episodes of breaking down. And they claim that if you're doing this for 2 years, which is a very long time to be stinging yourself 3 times a week, 10 times each time, but if you're doing it for 2 years, you can be cured of Lyme's disease, which they haven't found a cure to it yet. They found ways to help out the symptoms, but not necessarily cure it. So if that's true, that's quite phenomenal. And kind of the same story with MS, that they've found that this bee venom therapy is really helping these MS patients to be able to live longer without experiencing symptoms, have healthier days, and be able to, live their best self. So there's something to it. And then of course you have conspiracy theories that are like, well, the reason it's not in the medical world is because you can't monetize it. You can't, like they're, pushing all these hard pharmaceutical whatnot. And I don't know. I don't know what the real case is. I don't know why they're not doing deep dives in those medical areas. But there's a study in Australia that's doing a lot with the breast cancer and bee venom. And they've been making some huge strides. And we'll see. We'll see how that all goes. I think it's a little bit different, testing things out in a petri dish with how it translates to like an actual human body and how that works. But they're finding that the bee venom is attacking specifically the cancer cells and leaving other cells healthy. It's rapid. It's effective, like within the hour that these cancer cells are dying. So it's quite incredible. And so I think we're on to some really fun things. I don't know what, and I try and stay on top of reading about things, but yeah, I think one day we'll figure out how wonderful the bees are. Maybe when we die, we finally figure it all out, but it's
Figure
exciting.
it all out.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So with bee venom therapy, like you have to get stung. There's no way to do it without a bee stinging you.
So with the cancer, it's a concentrated serum that they have to inject directly into the tumor. So it's not something that you can just get stung with.
Okay.
But with the Lyme's disease and the MS, it's direct bee stings. Yeah. And I asked this girl, I'm thinking, like, is there a way to extract the bee venom that you could give yourself a shot and maybe it's less painful, or I don't know. And I guess she was saying as you extract the venom, it has a shelf life. And so the freshest, nicest venom is like straight from the source. So that's why she does that. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That sounds intense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to get stung once. I'm sure I've been stung in my life, but I don't remember.
Oh, you haven't been stung with your bees yet?
No.
Just
No.
embrace it. Embrace it.
Okay.
I mean, it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. But so when a bee stings, the stinger is ripped off and the bee dies.
Oh, he does die. Okay.
Yeah. And that stinger's ripped off, and what's ripped off is the venom sac. And that venom sac will actually pulsate and keep pumping venom into you for 20 minutes. And so this girl who stings herself, she lets those venom sacs sit on her for 20 minutes and just keep pumping stuff into her. So if you're brave enough Maybe even let the venom sac sit on you for a little while and let it pump a little bit of venom into you, because it's good for you.
Because the natural reaction is probably to pull the stinger out.
To flick it right away for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try to remember that.
Maybe for the first couple of stings. Yeah, just, you don't have to. But my husband had a basketball injury. His wrist was really bothering him. And I was like, I'm going to bring you home a bee. Like, let's do this. I'm going to bring you home a bee. So I found, and usually the forager bees are like the older bees. They're towards the end of their life. Their venom is the most potent. And so, so I got one of these forager bees and I brought it home, and mentally, like, it's one thing to spontaneously be stung, but to mentally actually sting yourself, like hold the bee close to you and, assist it. It's a mind game. It was quite comical, but, his wrists, it swelled up pretty good. Like, you can't really avoid the swelling. Make sure you're not allergic if you're doing any of this, but you can't really avoid the swelling, but it really helped out his wrist. He was very pleased with, like, and we don't know if it was just, it was on the recovery process already, but he likes to think that it helped. So it's kind of fun.
That's really cool. Well, I'll have to take note of how my body feels after my first sting, and see what happens. Are there any other insects that you love? That are like cool facts that people
I flew out to the East Coast. When did I fly out to the East Coast? Is that last summer or the summer? Is the summer before, for the Brood X cicada that had been underground for 17 years. And this really cool cicada that they emerge in the trillions, and that's their defense against their predators, is because there's so many of them that the predators can't eat them all, and that's their defense, is their numbers. And I was like, I got to see all this. And so it was really fun to go out and see these insects that were 17 years old, and be able to work with them and see how, they lay their eggs in the ground. The eggs merge. The larva, they live underground for those 17 years. The larva comes up onto the tree, the adult merges, and then they have that ear-piercing cicada sound that attracts their mate, and then they get together with their mate in the treetops of the leaves, and they mate in the treetops, which is just so romantic that they're singing involved and mating involved, and then they lay their eggs in the stems of the trees, and then as those little eggs hatch, they go back down into the ground. So I mean, like, I could go on a while about, like, how I feel like each individual insect has a unique way to breed, to eat, to defend itself, the colors, the structure of its body. Like, I'm completely fascinated by insects. So if you give me an insect and I study it long enough, it'll become my new favorite. Like, it happens that way. So yeah, there's a ton of insects that I can get pretty excited about.
Where I grew up, there were loads of mosquitoes. I grew up really far north that we despised.
Yeah, mosquitoes are a hard one, because mosquitoes are a hard one because they're not really that beneficial to the environment. They are such a pest. I'm actually testing out some new ways to get rid of them, that are a little more ethical. I mean, I think everyone would love a camping trip free of mosquitoes. That would be, and plus I like to go out and camp, but I want the insects close to me. I don't want to deter all of them. I just want to deter the mosquitoes. So I've been playing with kind of some different things with mosquitoes. We'll see how that all pans out. But yeah, I agree. The mosquitoes aren't top of the list for sure.
There's nothing unique and wonderful so far.
Not a lot redeemable about them. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What about the wasps?
I think wasps are great. I have a couple of big wasp nests up on my shelf here. Wasps are very fascinating. They're actually pollinators. A lot of people don't think that they're, can help with pollination, but they do. Not as well as the honeybees, but they do. But then also, they're huge on eating. They're carnivorous, and they eat other insects, and they can help keep the pest levels in your yard way low. That they're eating like larvae to a lot of different things. And so if you don't have little kids running around, because they are aggressive, they're carnivorous stinging insects. But if you don't have little kids running around and clear out on the back of your property, there's a big wasp nest. Yeah, let it thrive. I think that's fascinating. I think it's really cool to have that as part of a little ecosystem there, for sure.
Is there anything medicinal or therapeutic with getting stung by wasps or a hornet?
They say that they've made a lot of strides in honeybee and bumblebee venom, but I've heard beneficial stuff to wasp venom as well. But I've like the majority and the chunk of what they're doing has been with honeybee venom. So I don't know if that has, it's got a protein in it. I think it's a protein. Is called melatonin, and that's the main thing that's been beneficial with like in the cancer research or whatever, is that in there. And I don't know if wasps have enough or like as much as like the bees do, but there definitely is something, I think, something good about it. Yeah.
And as a beekeeper, what do you have to look out for that could, destroy your hive? I know bears. We have a lot of bears
everything
here.
Skunks. Yeah. If you're talking about big creatures,
what about the little
bears or
creatures
skunks
too?
And then you have like, the varroa mite is a huge problem. Your beetles, ants, like lots of other things. If your hive is strong enough, it could defend itself against a lot of the little things. So as a beekeeper, you kind of are in charge of keeping the hive healthy and helping it against the bigger things. If you're in bear country, to get a good fence around the hive or whatnot. But yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that can attack your hive, and I mean, yeah, you never really can tell what's going to happen.
What's going to get it?
Yeah.
What would an unhealthy hive look like? Like it would just
low in numbers. That like it's struggling. That there's not a nectar flow. It's not being built out with any honey or pollen, and the numbers are depleting. Maybe the queen is having a tough time laying, and so so mostly the numbers. But then also like if you have so at this point, almost every hive has varroa mite. It's a huge problem. And it really is now just controlling the numbers of varroa mite that's in your hive, not necessarily like making sure your hive doesn't have any. And so if you're not on top of those numbers and haven't been helping that, the varroa mite carries a handful of diseases that can really bring down the quality of your hive, that your bees would be born with deformed wings, that they would be weaker, and so to stay on top of that as well.
Okay. Yeah. I think it was a mites issue, part of it, that took out all the
really
honeybees last winter.
Yeah. Seems about right. Yeah.
Beautiful. There's something else, and it's lost me, this one question that I have, but let's go with what's been your biggest lesson with beekeeping?
Oh man, my biggest lesson. I feel like it changes all the time. Like I feel like I'm just learning one new lesson after another. I really, maybe back to like my favorite thing about it, but like that it's all connected, like that people say, well, how can I help the bees? And you're thinking, well, you help the bees by helping the plants and helping the soil, but also helping the other insects work nicely in your area. So it's not just all on the bees. And then, to help us and, good food. And like, it feels like you can't do one thing without doing all the things, which is overwhelming at times, but also so beautiful. It's so beautiful that we're all connected, and to realize that like, I am no better than the honeybee, and the honeybee is no better than me. Like we all are just like existing in this space where we are helping each other, where we're there to thrive and exist. And, to have that mindset, as you're beekeeping, and then letting that carry over into just life lessons and whatnot is kind of a beautiful thing. So maybe that's my biggest lesson. Yeah.
And would that be, I've been told that you learn so much from the bees, that as a beekeeper, you learn so much from the bees. Yeah. Would that be the same, like as the biggest lesson that you've learned from the bees, like on how to live and how to thrive?
No, I mean, like there's definite bee behavior that is very inspiring. It's very inspiring when you see a bee or any type of insect that has such determination to work hard, that it's like has on its DNA imprinted with what it's supposed to do to help out the hive as a whole. But then also that kind of like, it gives its life for the hive. Like it's not like, I don't know. You don't find bees that have their own agenda and are going to start protesting or, and how cool is it that to kind of surrender yourself to a bigger cause and to help out a bigger community. So I don't know. It's inspiring to see the bees and like thinking like, why are you doing that? What's going on in that head and in that, I don't know. So yeah, there's different things you can learn. Yeah.
That's really cool. So with that, like working for the bigger cause as the bees, are they all like working together to produce this honey, essentially?
Yeah, well, the queen cannot survive without the workers. They're physically feeding her. So even when you're transporting a queen from A to B, you put her in a box with a bunch of worker bees because they're the ones that if you transport her alone, she would die. And then if you were to take the queen away from the hive, the worker bees, if they don't have like an egg to raise up to a new queen, they don't have a queen, they're eventually going to die. Their numbers start depleting and they die. And then the drones, the boys are just kind of worthless without anyone else because they just eat. Like they don't know how to forage. They don't even have stingers. They can't even defend the hive. So everyone in that hive like needs each other, And people usually think, "Oh, queen bee, like she's in charge." Not necessarily. Like she is very important and an integral part to the hive, but even if she's not producing, the honeybees or the worker bees will kill her and raise up a new queen. So it's not even like there's a hierarchy. It's just a bunch of bees that need each other that are working together, which is cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Bee pollen. I know I have some bee pollen
you
that
do?
I
Good job.
eat.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but we shouldn't be eating it as humans because then the bees aren't going to have like, kind of the whole honey thing, but a little bit of bee pollen.
So everyone says, to cure your allergies, eat local honey. Like that's the thing. You got to eat local honey. Well, the reason that you eat local honey is because it actually still has pollen in it. Because, you buy your honey at the grocery store, 75% of the honey that you buy that it has a label on it, that it's been FDA approved, is no longer honey. And I'm not talking about 75% of the jars. I'm talking about 75% of what is in the jars. They're getting really good at mimicking it, supplementing it with corn syrup, with beet syrup, and it's not even in the labels anymore. And it can be labeled as raw or organic and all the beautiful things, but it still is like terrible honey for you. And so you say local honey because usually that means it hasn't been tampered with. If you're hanging out at a farmer's market, it will have that bee pollen in it. And it's the bee pollen that's helping you with your allergies. It's the same thing as like, just taking a small dose of what's harming you to let your body adjust to it. So if you go right to the source of bee pollen, and you can get it at any like natural grocery store or whatnot, it's these little pollen granules, which are very hard to mimic. It's not like those are going to be authentic. And if you start taking those, it's going to help expedite your immunity to allergies. Some people who have severe allergies actually flares it up, that they might even have an allergic reaction if they're not being too careful. But take it consistently for a year and your allergies will dramatically change.
Oh, interesting.
Do you have bee allergies?
No.
Seasonal allergies? You don't?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I got bee pollen because it's said to be good for like libido and testosterone and hormones in a woman. Is there any truth to that?
No, I've heard that. Now that you say that, it triggers something that like I've heard, but I can't. It's not in my head prominent enough to recall what it was. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. The bee pollen for the bees are a really good protein source for them. And so a protein source and just the dander and stuff that's dancing in the spring air, like, sure, that helps my libido. Just thinking about it. Yeah. So, yeah.
It was in a hormones health book.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm going to I'll look that up when I get off here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Anything that's on your heart that you want to add to this conversation, love, before we close?
Shoot. Such a loaded question. I mean, like I teach about bees. I have, there's a course that I did last year. It was 17 classes and it was an hour each class. And I'll talk the entire time. Like I got so much to say, like that's one thing too, is like, maybe it's not bees, maybe it's not your thing to be out at a hive, but there is something so motivating about living a life where you are constantly learning and constantly growing, that there is not an end to like the knowledge that you're storing up in your head. And so I guess if you're listening to this podcast, you're not wanting to save the bees, go find something that keeps you alive, that keeps your brain active and helps you see beyond yourself. I think it's huge. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. With that, like, do you see, are the numbers very scary with how many bees are dying and stuff? Always like say, save the bees.
Yeah. So the neonicotinoids that had come out have dramatically affected things. Since the 70s, the insects are down 40%, and that's numbers, but also size. Like, so they're getting weaker, they're getting like smaller insects, and they're getting fewer. And, people who don't like bugs are like, great, that sounds like, and you're like, no, you don't understand what an integral part of this world they are. And so, yeah, it's a big deal. It really is. And, the monarch butterfly migration, it's so stunning. Everyone loves to see the monarchs. And so, of course, it's a huge point of study that those numbers are dropping, and it hasn't been what it has been for years. But it really is an indicator of like all the insects that, the bees, everything it's on the decline. And yeah, it's a huge problem. And it feels, especially when I'm like in it 24/7, it feels like I'm drowning trying to figure out a solution, just everyone going all different ways, and a lot of people who love money more than figuring out real solutions. And so I think the best thing that I've found is talking one-on-one, like something like this, like a podcast, and just inspiring people individually to do what they can to, and maybe that's not you to have a little homestead and have a garden, but to support others who are doing that, and to be able to, wherever you are, you can plant flowers. If you got worms on the balcony, you can have flowers on the balcony, and so to be able to plant those native flowers and help your bees, and then to be able to, just support and do the right things in your own little world. I think it has ripple effects. I really do. Hopefully it does. Yeah. I have to believe that it does. Or I'll go crazy.
It does. And I have pots and a whole garden on my balcony.
That's great.
Just different ways, you can put a bee hotel in lots of different places. The book To Build an Ark is a great little resource by Mary Reynolds, just for the listeners, on different ways that you can help insects and bees and nature.
That's great.
Thrive. Are there any books that come to mind for you?
Oh man. If you're a real big bee geek and you like the science of it, I would do The Mind of a Bee. It goes into like more detail of how awesome they are and how they function. But then also, I'm not even going to remember the name of it. There's a book that is really great, just kind of introduction of bees and how they functioned in the wild. Let me see, I have it right here. And to be able to sit and just kind of spend your time, The Lives of Bees, very simple book if you wanted to start small, that will just talk a little bit about a scientist's journey and finding native bees in the wild. And I really feel like, the first step that we can do is just educate ourselves, to just expand our knowledge on things so we're a little bit more aware. So yeah. What was your book called again? I want to write that down.
Well, I said it wrong. I just remembered I said We Are the Ark.
We Are the Ark.
We Are the Ark by Mary Reynolds.
Yeah.
That's great. All about rewilding your land, like essentially letting it go back to nature.
I love that.
So then, insects can thrive, like all different, everything can thrive when we let things go back to its natural way. I love this conversation. I could talk about bees forever. So fun. Where can everybody find you?
Instagram is where I function right now. So yeah, McKay Jo on Instagram. Yeah, it's a good time there. I just geek out about bugs all day. So come join me.
Amazing. And it'll be in the show notes where everybody can reach out to you. Well, thank you so much, love, for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. Please like, share, download, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and I will See you next week for another episode on the Phoenix Rising podcast. Sending so much love.